Hey everybody, welcome back to Epiphany Week. I'm Jessica Henry Gray. I'm excited to have you with today on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about what the video is I'm featuring this day on Epiphany Week. Today we're going to talk about drawing horses. Now I get a lot of requests to do horse videos and so forth. On my Epiphany channel I've got a lot of different drawing horses videos as well as some painting videos. Today I'm going to show you just a brief drawing of how to get the skeletal structure correct in the body, and then I'm going to show you a close-up drawing of the eye and the hoof as well, because a lot of people struggle with legs and hooves, so I just wanted to highlight those a little bit for you today. Now, because it's Epiphany Week, and Epiphany is my page that I have a platform where I've got about 50 videos up there teaching all sorts of art education. All right, so let's get drawing some horses. What I want to really cover is the essentials of what a horse is made up of. Now, I am starting with the horse, like I said before, because from the knowledge of a horse, you can do any four-legged animal, whether you're doing a mouse or a dinosaur, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to start with the horse. Now, first things first, I want to cover the basics of the skeletal structure. So when you have, I'm going to go from the side because it's a really nice, just standard structure. I'm going to talk about the vertebrae. First, it comes down from the skull. Skull would be about in here. The neck comes about like this. And you've got the scapula. The front of a horse has a large shoulder blade like this. And there's a joint in here. If you think about that as being your scapula on your back, that's the function of that shoulder blade. And then this bone here comes down. That's like our clavicle to what would basically be the elbow joint. And then the knee, the leg comes down to the knee and then down to the hoof. Now the rib cage is about in here like this, and meanwhile, this vertebrae, there's a dotted line there because it's on the other side of the scapula, comes up to form what is known as the withers. This is the withers on a horse, and the saddle would fit right about in there. So the withers comes up, formed by the vertebrae, and we've got our rib cage of the horse in this window here. So this is still the vertebrae here, and it comes all the way across and down and then forms the tail. It's important to recall that the tail is still part of the horse's spine. Oftentimes we see art, even children's drawings, where it's sort of stuck in the horse's hind end like a ponytail, and it's an extension of the vertebrae. So just think about it as that. All right, so now what we have is the point of the hip, and we've got this, see if you can just sort of get in your head that this is the greater than sign, and then this will be the less than sign. So we've got this V, sort of sideways V coming like this. Like that. So we've got this angle this way, and then this one goes backwards. So this, if you can think about this movement as being this way on every animal, whether it's a giraffe, a mouse, a hippopotamus, it doesn't matter, they're all going to function within that format. Okay, so then this is a large gap. And right here we have called the stifle. This is a stifle joint. It's like our kneecap, way up there. So then we've got this back bone here, and then the hock coming here. This is a lower leg bone. This is a joint here that causes the movement to lift up And we'll get into all of the anatomy of the hooves and legs and so forth, and the other leg. So we've got the other hip on this side, and the other leg right here. And then this one would, of course, be on the other side over there. All right, so now let's flesh out our skeleton a little bit better. Well, here, we'll give him a head. Poor guy. Skulls, horse skulls are very interesting to really just take apart and look at. I always crack up when I'm in Home Depot and I see the skeleton of the horse for Halloween and it's got the ears. Definitely, horse skulls do not have skeletons in their ears. All right, so this is basically a basic horse skull. And the eye socket, quite large, the cheekbone. So their mandible comes up in here, and they have teeth going way to the back of their skull. Not quite as many up here, which is a nice design because that's where the bit's gonna go when you're riding. Teeth are in there, large eye socket. Okay, so there's our basic skeletal anatomy without drawing all the separate bones and so forth, which we don't really need. The essentials are there, and now let's flesh out our horse. There are places on the horse where the bone is closer to the skin, and those places are, for example, the withers. There's usually a lot more muscle on the hind end, but the back is very close to the spine. There's some places on the legs for sure where it's just skin. This here is called the gaskin. I remember when I was young and learning the parts of the horse, the way that my mom described this part of the horse, right in here where there was a muscle, a large muscle, that is the power, where a horse gets the power from their hind end. Yes, they get it from their entire hindquarters here, but this propels them forward, and it's called the gaskin. Mom said always think of it as the gas can that pushes the horse forward. So they have their gas can. So this point of the hip comes down. There's flesh over it, not much, but some. And it tucks into the gaskin, coming that way. All right, so you can see now how we're starting to flesh out. If you could see, if you could shave the hair off their tail, it comes about like that. And of course it moves around so they can swish flies and so forth. All right, so we've got the stifle here, and then their whole barrel, the rib cage, has a slight rise here, and then it comes up. Typically, unless you have a lazy pasture horse, which we did have some of those growing up, and then they're quite a bit fatter. But we're gonna, for the sake of anatomy, make ours all in shape. All right, so now the chest of the horse comes up, and it about meets the point of the shoulder right here. And then the slope is right here as that comes up. And then we come up to the neck, and right up here where the vertebrae meets the skull, it's a little bit less flesh. But as we go down, this gets a lot thicker in here. The leg comes about like that. And you can see where we're going with it now. And the ears are going to be in about this vicinity here. And we will break down all of the important aspects of ears and muzzles and the eye and all this. So let's put some flesh. There's very little flesh on a horse's head. The muzzle, like our nose, is all cartilage. Okay, and then we'll tuck in that eye in there. Okay, so we're off to moving ahead with that. So this is the overall basic structure of the four-legged animal, okay? Eyes of a horse are very expressive, and they can tell a lot about what the horse is thinking or feeling. And I like to really spend some time observing them and how they sit in the eye itself, and the interesting shape and tucks and contours around the eyeball as the skin wraps around. We know our own eyes so well from just living with us, but it's amazing though how once you put the paper in front of us, we tend to forget. Well, horses are pretty much the same way. We've looked at their horses' lovely eyes for so long, but then so often the tendency, I think, of a beginner is to put the eye either in the wrong spot or shape it more like an oval like ours, like an almond shape, or give it too much white. If you're seeing white in a horse's eye, it's because they're afraid or angry or startled or alarmed in some way. So they don't have naturally that white like we do on ours. If you do see it, you'll see it maybe down in here as they're looking up or alarmed, whatever. All right, so carving out this eye a little bit more this way. The iris, or the pupil on a horse's eye is sort of like a goat. It's shaped like that on the inside. So if you care to get that detailed, which I typically don't, I usually just draw the eye or paint the eye quite dark with a little bit of a shine. It's pretty much all it needs, because they're so expressive. To get caught up in random details like that, it can be distracting. So let's give it a shine there. I'm going to kind of pull that shine down a little bit to indicate the form of the eye. All right, now we've got this lower eyelid, the skin that's wrapping around, and I don't want to make it as light as the shine, but it still needs to be considerably lighter than the shadows around it, just so that we can understand that that is the eyelid down below. See how that's a little bit lighter value in there? It's going to correct that shape just a bit. There we go. It helps to look at pictures of horses when you're working on your exercises here. So if you can find a good horse magazine or books or whatever, That's a very good idea. Now the formation of the bone around the eye is every bit as important on doing a horse as it is on doing a person, because that ocular cavity gives the whole structure its form and shape. So this passage here where the tear duct is here, this creates something of a valley inside the horse's skull. Right there. As well as coming down and around under the eye socket. There's a little bit of a darker valley in here. And you can develop your darker valleys and shading by going over passages repeatedly instead of trying to push harder. Just going over an area a few times with your pencil can help to darken where you need it to be darkened. I'm going to develop this value up in here a little bit darker to indicate that concavity above the eye socket. Okay, getting there. So as the eye socket comes down this way, the upper portion of this orbital cavity, there's sort of a darker passage in here. Remember when we had the jawbone, as I was indicating that, a large passage. This value indicates where the mandible then would attach to the upper part of the cranium in here. Okay, so there's the horse eye. Now it works the same whether they're looking at you however you work on sculpting out the eyelids and the wrinkles and folds. So I'm not going to go through all of that with this one again, but you get the idea then. This bulge here is represented right here. As you can see, it would come down and around, going back that way. The fold here under the eye is represented here. This concavity right here is represented right here. And then down that would go, and up, and so forth. Okay, so that is the horse eye. All right, the horse hoof. Hooves and legs tend to give artists the most trouble because it's kind of like fingers. There can be so many variables and so many movements that can change the appearance. So I want to talk about the structure of the hoof first, and then we'll work our way up the leg. So a hoof in general is made up of, if you can think about it, just angles. It's about a 51 to 48 degree angle. Let's just say 50 for the sake of whatever. Right here. And the back one should be about parallel to that. And then we've got the bottom as such, level. Now the top here, where this is a coronet band, now we have a trapezoid because this is going to connect with this, but it's not parallel to the ground because it's not a box and it's not exactly a parallelogram. Is that what they're called? Geometry is not my strength. So essentially what we have is this. Now I like to round the corner. This is called, I used to trim my own horse's hooves. This is called the Mustang roll. And that means wild horses in the wild, without shoeing or trimming, wear down their hooves naturally, and it forms, as they run and play on hard rocks and hard ground, it wears to this beautiful rounded Mustang roll. So that's what we call it in the hoof trimming world. Now this back here, these are the bulbs of the hoof. So we're going to round that just a little bit and bring it up to the top, like that. Now here is our hoof from the side. Now back to the anatomy leading up to it. The coronet band is a very sensitive part of the horse's hoof. If you imagine that this is like your cuticle joint, okay? This whole thing is a toenail. So trimming their hoof doesn't hurt any more than clipping your own fingernail. Now I never shod my horses with shoes because they don't need it if you are just doing trail riding and so forth like that. So this is the pastern. A hoof wall inside here is made up of the means to expand and contract. It's hard fibrous structure that has blood flowing in it. When you put a solid iron shoe on a horse's hoof, they can no longer expand and contract, which inhibits blood flow. And it's not overall a healthy thing for an animal. So I never shod for that reason as well. Especially with jumping. I used to do more jumping, and when they land, their hoof has to expand upon impact. So I didn't like putting a shoe on them specifically for that too. Okay, so we've got our pastern, and it is a slender shock absorber in the context of their leg. Now, if you imagine, you're riding a bike and you put your feet on the pedals and you are up off the seat, your leg has the means of avoiding any bumps and lumps because you have a springing action. Well, that is what this pastern here is going to do for the horse. There's tendons in here that when there's pressure and weight, they can push down further like this and they can push off this way to jump, for example. And so that can curve around like that when they're taking off, or push when they're rearing or getting ready to jump off their back hoof. So that is that anatomy there. Now this in here, we're going to start to give this some shading and value so that you can understand a little bit better the form of this. So this fetlock ball, that's the joint. There's a slight lift in that pastern there. And this is a nice little tuft of hair growing around the hoof, and then the hoof itself. Oftentimes people don't realize that hooves are not necessarily all black. Sometimes they're white and sometimes they're striped, black and white. White hoofs are softer. I don't know why. Maybe because there's less pigment, so it makes them not as hard. We'll make ours striped, just because. All right, everybody, well, that wraps this video up. I hope you enjoyed this brief look into drawing horses. Now remember, on my Epiphany page, I've got a lot more information on drawing horses, painting horses, and so forth. This is day 6, and I will see you tomorrow on our last day, day 7. All right, guys, see you then.